Hi, ladies.
So, Shantae, is tonight you, or is it?
Yep, I asked her, I was like, is you?
Yeah.
Thank
It's
you. Hi.
So as you know, we're streaming. So once the teaching and learning committee portion is over, I will stop streaming and then go into.
Okay.
So, Shantae, is tonight you?
Oh, that's
Or
my
is it-
YouTube.
Yep,
Yep,
it's me. Yeah.
Mute.
That was funny.
It happens all the time.
So I'll say, well, we can't start because we don't have who's presenting yet.
Oh, for the teaching and learning portion? Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I'm about to say, we're going to start in 3 minutes. No.
Maybe they'll get here.
I assume that's Dr. Negron to do the calendar.
Yes. Oh, that's what I.
And earlier I was thinking executive session. So I literally was thinking 5:30 and something was like, check
me
the
check.
calendar. And it was 4:07. I was like,
Oh.
I don't know. It just was in my mind to think 5:30 because I was thinking of us going into executive session.
Oh, the other, yeah, meetings.
Yeah. Should we be waiting for those who need to come into executive session too? Because this portion may not take
That long. You know what? I'm gonna text because I know I got quite a few who said that they were coming to the executive. So let me send the messages while we have this meeting to just.
But is it okay if we get started?
Yeah, we have Dr. Negron here. Let me check if Yvette is joining because I know she's the other member, actual member for now.
I think she was in another meeting. I don't know if she was gonna run late or something like that.
Sorry, I actually meant Yvette Bella.
Oh, sorry.
Yvette, Phil's, and there was another one now.
Okay, I'm gonna call the meeting to order if we have to wait to go into executive session, but I don't want to hold up this meeting. Good evening, everyone. This is Hartford Public Schools Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. The meeting, I can't say the first meeting because we had 2 meetings just in this month because of how it ran, right? Did we meet this month? It feels like we met this month. Yeah. Okay. So I'm like, so it's our second meeting of the year. Welcome, fellow board members. Ms. Oliver is here, Ms. Escobar, and Mr. Johnson, I see. So we are going to go right into the meeting. And the one item on the agenda for this evening, and I'll turn it over to Chief Negron to take it from here.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Great to be here with you once again. Yes, we have met twice this month. And I'm here to share with you a draft. I want to highlight this is just a draft, initial thinking around the academic calendar. And to do so, I am going to share my screen. So give me 1 second. Okay, can you see that? Actually, let me just change the view for 1 second. I think that's gonna throw me off. So all you can hear is my clicking over here. Okay, there we go. All right, so again, this is going to be the draft of the academic calendar for 22-23. Want to share with you a little bit about the process that we've taken so far. So there has been internal collaboration between the Office of Academics, Office of School Leadership, Office of Talent Management, and Office of Operations. Immediately after we drafted what I'm going to be presenting to you, I emailed that immediately to HFT leadership for initial reactions. And I am now going to share that with you, again, for some initial reactions. From there, the plan is to continue ongoing communication and discussion with HFT leadership. And then it is scheduled for first reading at the BOE meeting on the 15th, with bringing it back to this committee again on February 23rd, and then going to second reading and adoption to the entire Board of Education at the meeting in March 15th. So I just wanted to kind of share those dates with the Teaching and Learning Committee. So when we draft initial thinking around the calendar, these are the sources of information that we use. So for example, number one, we look at other district calendars that may be available to us. So in this case, there were 12 calendars that were already available. 9 of those districts, please know, that are going to be starting the year on the week of August 29th. And I have there the districts that are doing so, those 9 districts. There are 3 out of those 12 that have chosen to start their academic year the week of August 22nd. And that is East Hartford, Glastonbury, and Newington. There are no districts in these 12 that we've taken a look at right now that are starting after Labor Day. So again, so far, everything we've looked at, they're starting before Labor Day. The other piece that we do is we take a look at what we call the attendance heat map. Abby Ollinger Quinn in the Office of Data and Accountability has been doing a great job in the last, I want to say now like 5 years, where we track, right? How does it look for attendance every single day? And we pay close attention to like holidays, before and after, early release days, those kinds of things, to kind of learn from all of that. So we have taken a look at what we call the attendance heat map. And number 3, of course, we always take a look at the bargaining agreements to make sure that we are staying aligned with those. So that was some of the sources of information that went into drafting it. So the calendar that I'm going to put in front of you today takes into consideration these 3 things. 1, it is a calendar to start before Labor Day. Also, we're looking to provide an extended winter break so that we can afford time for any COVID text clinics or any of the sort, right? Because we're still in this pandemic and we don't know where that's gonna be in the future. And we wanted to be proactive in it. So we are affording that in this calendar that I'm going to show you. And number 3, that we're also building in, again, those 2 intercessions that we spoke about when we were thinking about the strategic operating plan. So those things are going to be built in to the calendar that you are going to see. Also, it does take these assumptions, right? The first assumption is that it is a 180-day school year for students and a 187-day school year for staff. So that is the first assumption. Number 2, again, is the extended winter break. And that goes through 3 Kings Day, again, to include any post-holiday COVID testing if that were to be needed. There are 7 full days of professional learning days. So there is intentionality around scheduling those days when students are most likely to be absent, right? And that's going back to the heat map that I referenced at the beginning. And we use, for example, Indigenous Peoples Day, Election Day, and that week of 3 Kings Day to leverage those days for those full days of professional learning. This calendar, you will see, it has 13 early release days, which is a reduction from the current one that we have now, which has a total of, let me make sure I'm giving you the right number. The current one this year has 27. But again, looking at our attendance, where we know those early release days are not easy for families, and often they do impact their student attendance. And it does have the 4 days of intercessions in February and April to be consistent with what we have this year, so that right later we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. And it does look to end the academic year by June 15th. So again, those are the assumptions that we use when we built it. So now I want to
Dr.
just,
Negron,
yes.
A point of reference. So I know we're going to have a lot of board members that are going to be popping in because we are going to executive session. I'm going to say, if you have a question, if you could please raise your hand in the chat. Not in the chat, but raise your hand. That will be helpful because we're going to have so many people online. And I was going to say, do you prefer to pause, Dr. Negron, to ask questions? Because it's not, how many more slides do you have?
2 more.
So, well, you're almost finished
Yeah.
anyway, but I know Mr. Johnson mentioned Juneteenth in as a possible discussion around celebrating that day. He entered that into the chat.
Okay. So I'm gonna make sure, I don't have my chat open right now, so I'm gonna be.
yeah,
relying-
I can do you, Madam Chair. I can hold my, it's 2 more slides left. I can hold my questions.
Okay.
Please.
I would prefer that if I can, so I can kind of walk you through, and then this way I can really listen attentively and jot down my notes. Because normally, right, I gather your feedback here. As I mentioned, there'll be feedback that I will be getting from HFT, and more so as we continue those ongoing conversations. So,
Thank you.
all right, so here's August. So I mentioned, right, we're looking to start before Labor Day. So the first day for students will be the Monday, the 29th. That would mean that we would have these 3 full days like we have had in the past for professional learning days. But I want to add that out of that, there will be a half day dedicated to afford teachers time for classroom setup. That is something new that we are building in. So somewhere here Most likely we're looking possibly that first day. So teachers again have the half day to set up. Again, first day being the 29th. And again, if we were going to offer some COVID test clinics, that could happen during these last 2 weeks in August. In September, right, we have Labor Day off. There would be early release for professional learning on the 7th and also on the 21st. Everything else will be a regular day. That gives us 21 days in September. In October, there will be early release for professional learning on the 5th and the 19th. The 10th, students are off, right? Because that is Indigenous Peoples Day, but that is when we would do a full day of professional learning for staff. This is more for like our notes that, you know, PSAT school day happens October 12th. So that's something that we always keep in mind when we're drafting a calendar. In November, early release for professional learning on the 2nd. The first marking period would end on the 4th. 7, we would begin the second marking period. On the 8th, there will be a full day professional learning day. So the kids are off, but the staff is working because that is election day. Schools will be closed on the 11th because that is another holiday right there. And then we would have parent-teacher conferences, 15th and the 16th, the 16th being an early release day for that purpose. Then we have an early release on the 23rd of November so that everybody could enjoy Thanksgiving break like we have always done. Right, we come back to school on the 28th. That brings us to December. There will be an early release for professional learning on the 7th. There will be an early release on the 23rd so that everybody could begin the holiday break. So then we are on break this entire week. If we need to run any kind of clinics again, we have the 29th and the 30th. The 2nd would be a day that we're closed because that is considered to be the federal holiday, right, to celebrate New Year's Day. So then here we would have been off anyway because it's Three Kings Day on the 6th. So what we are proposing is that we would be closed on the 3rd, right, that extended break, have the kids off, but bring the staff back on the 4th and the 5th so we could do professional learning. And then all the kids come back on the 9th. Traditionally, right, we lose a lot of kids before Three Kings Day or after. So there'll be a way to kind of accommodate that. On the 11th, it would be early release for Professional Learning Day. The 16th will be a holiday. So again, schools are closed. And then this brings us to the end of the second marking period. So we have to think about when do midterms happen for our high school students. And we will be looking at this week of the 23rd. That then takes us to February. We would build in an early release for professional learning on the 1st, parent-teacher conferences again, 7th and the 8th, with the 8th being early release. And then there's a holiday on February 20th when we are closed. And then we would be off for this February break. And this is when we would run, right, the intercession in February. Then everybody returns on the 27th. March, there will be 2 early release for professional learning. And lastly, that brings me to April, early release on the 5th, The quarter would end on the 6th. We are all off on the 7th. I believe that's Good Friday, right? And then we would be on spring break. So intercession would run 10, 11, 12, and 13th. And again, spring break continues into the 14th. The last marking period would begin on the 17th. There'll be teacher parent conferences again on 25th and 26th with our early release on the 26th. May would begin with early release on the 10th for professional learning. There is always this additional day that we set aside. It's early release. Elementaries tend to use it for any additional parent-teacher conference that needs to happen. And then we also dedicate that day for records keeping with our staff. So we have built that in like we have always done. The 29th, we will be off for Memorial Day. And then that brings us to June. Last early release on the 7th. We would have to start getting our high schoolers ready for finals, right? Which brings us to a last day of school on the 15th. And then we would always reserve 16, 19, and 20, those 3 days in case there are any school cancellations or any of those things. So that is the overview of the calendar. And now I'm going to pause for questions.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, do you, Madam Chair, good evening, everyone. It's so good to see everyone on this wonderful evening. I just have some general concerns. I mean, the calendar is, you know, I like the calendar, but I could see where parents would struggle. And so my first question is, you know, who have we talked to about this proposed schedule? For me personally, I would like to know what some parents' feedback regarding the schedule is. So, I mean, that's question number one. Because it feels like during the Christmas January holiday, it seems like kids are home for 2 weeks. And that could be very strenuous on parents. I'm not saying for older children, but some of our younger students and their parents, that may be, I have younger kids and I know, you know, my daycare was closed actually on the same schedule. My daycare was closed, and Phil knows what I'm talking about because our kids go to the same daycare. It was closed for 2 weeks. It was closed the week of Christmas into the new year in it almost felt like 3 weeks, but it was literally 2 weeks, kind of the same schedule. And it was a lot, you know, because, you know, although the schools are closed, parents have to go back to work and they have that level of care. So I would just be interested on how are we just taking that into, you know, taking that under consideration. And I'll allow you to answer, and I have 2 more questions after that.
Before you go, Dr. Negron, I don't know if you heard the first part of her presentation that she said she engaged the Hartford Federation of Teachers on, that was her first engagement. It was like part of her first couple slides. And I'm assuming and I'll let her answer, but with COVID and how parents were saying they were not comfortable sending their children back right after the break. And they was like, because I know I didn't send mine 2 days. I'm like, let it calm down because I wasn't comfortable. So I'm assuming that definitely was in response to teachers getting tested. It was some last minute things that went on with teachers trying to, them trying to say, if you're not feeling well, gauging who's going to be returning for after the break. It was like a lot of chatter amongst circles I'm in, at least. But I know that she stated earlier in her slide that HFT was engaged so far.
Yes,
In,
I
you
did
know,
hear that. Yeah, I did hear that, and not saying that HFT doesn't have the interest of parents. You know, that's not an assumption, but again, I just would be interested to hear parents, but I do understand the reasoning. Dr. Negron?
So I would say to your question, Ms. Brody is absolutely correct in terms of our rationale around the COVID, and that is why we are proposing what we are proposing for that week of the 2nd, right? So that was the rationale. In terms of the engagement, normally what happens is that when I come to teaching and learning committee in the past, right, I just bring you our initial thinking. And that's all I do, or initial thinking, here it is to this committee because this is where it comes. After here in the past, it goes out to further engagement. I did hear last year, one of the feedback was HFT said, hey, would have loved to be engaged even before we went to teaching and learning committee. So I'm responding to that. I heard you. Immediately after this draft was drafted, that was emailed to leadership. Of course, then I said, after the initial, normally I gather your thoughts. That informs other thinking that I gather before we get everything ready, prepared for you to engage in the first reading. As is going to the first reading, that is normally when the HFT sends it out to all their membership for feedback to them that then they offer to us, right? Us meaning this office that is very intimate in drafting the calendar. Then when you have your first reading, usually that's where a lot of the feedback comes in from families or anybody else that wants to respond, because that's when you are formally doing, right, your first reading. This has always been a way for us to be, hey, we're in this process. I'd rather have your thinking now before it even gets to that first reading, right? So your answer, have I engaged families? No, I'm not engaged any families, because that's our process, again, is to get everything ready for your first reading. And again, anything else that you have, I'm going to take it right now, regardless of where it's coming from.
I got you. I appreciate that, and that is very, very clear. And I thank you for your thoughtfulness and protocol on that. This is great. My next question is regarding I have a lot of notes. I really listened during public comment, and I can go back to the November 16th meeting, and I quote, teachers are feeling undervalued and feeling that PDs are work days, and they just want an opportunity for staff wellness and mental health and all these different things. And I think what I think you're trying to say in your proposal is that you're giving teachers more professional development full days. Is that accurate? Because again, during public comment, what I'm hearing is PDs, PDs are challenging for teachers. And is this an attempt to make it easier for them? Why the full days of PD? If you could just explain your thinking around it.
So the thinking here, full transparency, professional learning days are always, we always have the challenge that we don't have the time, right? We all have to get better. We all have to continue to grow, because we're never done, right? Learning and growing in what we do. So it's always the challenge of finding the time to be able to do that. And also listening that early release days are a little disruptive for families. We see that in our data. So the idea here, or initial thinking was more in response to our families in saying, hey, we had 25, what was it, 25 days? I lost my sheet again. Saying let's reduce the number of early release days because they impact attendance drastically from the 27 to 13. But if we go with the 180 calendar day for kids, it affords us 2 more full days of professional learning that often in full days we're able to do more than we are able to do on an early release days. As it relates to the wellness, all I'm showing to you right now are professional learning days. We are still nowhere in saying, hey, these days are school-based, district days, right? Because all of that factors in on like what happens, when do the wellness days come in? Do they happen on PL days? Do they happen via another structure? So all of that doesn't even come into this calendar yet. But I wanted to explain to you the rationale around the reduction of the early release days and leveraging 2 additional full professional learning days.
Okay, thank you. Final
Mr.
question.
Johnson, before you go to your final question, can Ms. Escobar squeeze in a question, please?
Oh, by all means, yeah.
Thank
Ms.
you, Madam
Escobar?
Chair. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. New board member here, so it's a pleasure to meet you. Ms. Negron or Mrs. Negron? I want to make sure I say it right. Dr. Negron, you're a doctor.
Dr.
So I
Negron, thank
apologize.
you.
I apologize. So a question. So for the PDs for the second week, this is in conjunction to what Pastor Johnson just said. With those PDs, as you said, right, families are out. Most of our teachers have kids too, right? Will these PDs be virtual or are they expected to go in school?
So Ms. Escribano, again, this is just the academic calendar.
Right.
And the academic calendar, what it does is lay out the number of days, the types of days. The actual professional learning calendar wouldn't be embedded here. So
Mhm.
like those decisions wouldn't be here yet.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be able to speak or respond to that question yet for you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Informing me of that. And then if you want, I can let Pastor AJ Johnson go. I just wanted to go back to the early release day just to see the calendar again, because one of my concerns would be if it's every Wednesday or twice, if our kids are released every month twice, right, on Wednesday, do they get into the habit of thinking every Wednesday it's a release day? You know, like it's a trend. Is that happening? I don't know the data for that, but it's just I'm putting it out there. I don't know if you have an answer for that, but that is one of my concerns, right? If kids don't show up for early release days and we're doing it twice a month, every Wednesday, is it in their head the assumption that every Wednesday is a release day for them? You know, just putting that out there, just a thought.
So if I may respond, like this current year, we did have that calendar that basically had pretty much like if it was a 5-day week, automatically every Wednesday became an early release.
Okay.
Right? That was the one that we were operating on. And we chose Wednesdays so that it would be like easy for families to remember, right? As opposed to having it a Friday or a Monday or a Tuesday. But then again, for that impact, then we look to drastically reduce that, knowing that we still got to figure out when all this professional learning would take place. And then what we also did is some months do have 2 days, but some do not, right? Whenever possible, we were trying to eliminate them, right? Like we actually started looking at every 2 weeks and we went back, like which one can we eliminate? So that's the way that we approach that phase of arriving with this one that you saw today. I hope that somewhat answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Negron. And I'll have more questions, but I'll reserve them for now. I'll pass it on to Reverend Pastor Johnson, sorry. And I'll be sure to email Christina to send you any questions I have. Thank you.
I was wondering, did Chief Avila have something to add to helping answer a question? 'Cause I
Yes,
see your head up. Yeah.
thank you, Ms. Brody. It was actually the first question that Mr. Johnson had, Pastor Johnson had, and it was regarding really around attendance. I just wanted to lift that our attendance data shows that when right after the holidays, that there are some families that take extended vacation, and the fact that we already have a day off and come back a day later, right? Because we don't come back on that Monday. It would align with our existing data that our attendance is going to be low, in addition to what we already know regarding COVID, right? And so I just want you to know that that was another factor that Dr. Negron and I spoke about when we were looking at the calendar to see what was best for our students and our families as well, looking at our attendance historical data and use that as a data point additional to the other pieces that she's already mentioned.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, final question. And Chief Avila, thank you for that explanation. And I think you all did a good job putting this together, following the data. And that's very, very clear. The more we discuss it, the more and more I get color, the color fills in for me on why you headed in this direction. So it's brilliant and it's appreciated. My last question is just around Juneteenth. I know it's a federal holiday. It falls in June. I'm not sure if the city adopted it yet. I think there's still conversations about that. But as for HPS, can you just shed some light on, why is Juneteenth not a holiday on our calendar?
So Pastor Johnson, I'm glad that you are bringing that up, because that is one of the questions then that we have to sort of discuss as an organization, because right now we're not, right? We don't have it acknowledged as it should be. So again, because it's not yet acknowledged, I cannot put it in this calendar that I have before you. That is where you come in as a board, right? In making those recommendations.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, that's a recommendation, right?
That is a recommendation, and please forgive my ignorance. I'm not sure which committee it may be this committee, but I would lean on leadership just to guide on how we make this. I don't think we need to go another year and not recognize this as a holiday.
No, she's here for us now to make recommendations. That's what this committee meeting is for.
Understood.
So
Well, yeah.
that is his recommendation. And I see Mr. Reger has his hand raised.
Yeah, sorry I joined late. Just a clarification. Juneteenth for the new calendar year is when, the 16th?
I see it
My
on the
understanding is
19th.
that the 19th,
19th?
which is a Monday.
Okay. And we're asking for that Monday off? Is that the recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, there are other, yes, the answer is yes.
Okay. And when does school end?
In the calendar that I shared, it would end on the 15th, but that's with no cancellations, right? If we had cancellations, we would then have to be adding either the 16th, the 19th, or the 20th. So it would be wise to then call that for the district to be closed, because if there are cancellations, it would impact the 19th.
So, I think that makes sense if we need to extend, but if we do need to extend, maybe we could take a look at just factoring that Juneteenth calendar on Monday, so maybe we start on the 20th. But just keep in mind, if there's no cancellations,
There's no school. Yeah.
there's no acknowledgement of Juneteenth from a calendar perspective, but maybe we could do something, a communication or something, so families know that we're formally acknowledging it, even though there's no school.
I think that's a great
Miss-
recommendation.
The likelihood of no cancellations. I think will be, oh, that's give or take. And I see Ms. Drestu Ledger hand raised, but I'm thinking Chief Avila wants to add to answering the question or adding.
I just wanted to add a question so that we have clear clarity. So in the event that we don't have additional cancellation and school is out on the 16th of this year, are we then saying because there's still employees that are working? So are we then saying, so I don't know what the resolution would be. I just want us to be clear. Are we then saying the other employees that are working, would they be off? Is that what we're saying? And I don't necessarily know how that gets determined, but I just want to put that on the table. So there's one option. If we have school, we would know that school would be closed, but then what happens with, other things that are happening in the district? Because there's many things that are happening during that time, right? We will have credit recovery in existings, probably. We'd have many other things that are happening in our district. And so just want to know, in your recommendation, I wanted you to consider that as well.
So does Mr. Rigueur or Mr. Johnson want to add?
Yeah. So the thing that I would add then, and I think that's actually a good point. What I would say is, can you take a look at the data and see how many times over X amount of years that we've actually canceled? What's the probability that it goes 2 days or so forth into the spillover? And then to the point around there are people working, just some type of, what's the potential financial impact if we were to have that day off of folks? And what does that mean from an operation perspective? Do we lose ground? Are we still able to maintain forward? So I guess is my way of saying, actually, before I can support any recommendation, I think we need more data to see what is the impact of having that day off, if in the event that school is over.
Yeah, I do you, Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I support that, right? I mean, because to me, it's more symbolic, and to me, Juneteenth actually means something. But I also understand we run the risk of school possibly not being in and having employees still there. So by all means, I understand that completely. And I would like to see the data if that lens, through that lens, if possible. So I can support Mr. Rigueur on his statement and recommendation of getting the data.
On that subject, I would just add that if we're recognizing Juneteenth, I personally would add that we're recognizing Juneteenth. We're not just recognizing it for students to be out of school. We're just recognizing that our staff is no one is working or going to school in observance of this holiday, giving it that recognition. So that would be my add to Juneteenth, regardless of financial impact. I know Mr. Rigueur is very meaningful when we're talking about the finances, but if we're saying we're going to observe, it's just observe staff. No one is working. Hartford Public Schools is actually not in session that day in observance. But that's just my 2 cents. Ms. Drestu Ledger.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. With regards to, I just wanted to add something. With regards to Juneteenth, if students are not in school, even though students are not in school, if there could be some type of teaching or education prior to the last day prior to the 15th, if you will, where teachers are required to just, even if it's reading a story or having a conversation about Juneteenth to educate the students about Juneteenth and how Juneteenth came about. There are books, there are children's books that are, built around Juneteenth. Adolescents can have conversations depending on if it's middle school, high school. But I think that there should be a conversation about Juneteenth at least, if the school does not have the opportunity to take that day off. Also, I would say the same for Kwanzaa, because Kwanzaa is between, December 26th and January 1st, which is, traditionally students are home. So having a conversation where it's put in the curriculum somewhere, where, make it a point to talk to your students about this, to have a conversation. The question that I do have though, is around professional development with regards to Montessori. So the question I have is there any professional development during those professional development days? Is there anything that's tailored to Montessori in the public sector? Because there are a few Montessori schools that are part of Hartford Public Schools. And also, is it possible to create something for those, the programs that that have specialized programs with regard for like Montessori, for example? And that's my question.
Chief Negron?
So thank you for the question. The answer related again to professional learning would be that those would be answered at the time that we draft the professional learning calendar that spells out exactly what it is that will be offered, whether at the district level or the school level. So for example, when you're speaking particularly around the Montessoris, when we build it, that is where that discussion would come in. I am definitely jotting down all the suggestions that you have made as it relates to Juneteenth, Kwanzaa, and now Montessori.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't see any other questions, hands raised rather. I did want to get some follow-up, if I could, on where are we with the tutoring. Only thing I could think of is K-12, something. I can't even think of the name, but the tutoring that was supposed to happen for 4,500 of our students. If I could get some follow-up on where we are with that, I would greatly appreciate it. But I do see one more hand raised, Ms. Oliver.
Hi, yes, it was late. Hi. My question was, part of it was a little bit earlier with Juneteenth. The other question, and I don't really know how to formulate this question, is I'm, very aware, right, of the October 1st day and what that does in terms of setting the enrollment. And I was thinking about the calendar in terms of sometimes the classes have to move and what that does for the staff. And this may be connected back to your explanation, Dr. Negron, of more so the development of what that professional day is. But I wonder, have we taken into consideration in the past, or perhaps for this year, the fact that there's that day where basically our enrollment freezes and we do determinations of classrooms, and teachers sometimes have to move and reset in a different classroom or a different sometimes facility, and providing time for them to do that. And if that connected to a professional day, I'm just wondering, because it was a more relevant or recent conversation, I should say, about that freezing of that date, and what sometimes, unfortunately, if we don't have the enrollment we're expecting, that there's movement. And just wondering if that either has been in helping to inform and shape the calendar in the past, or if that's something that we could think about now.
So that specifically has not, so I'm glad you're bringing it up. So I will definitely bring this back to the team.
thank you. So I don't see any other hands right in swing. Ms.
Sorry.
Bello?
Thank you,
No.
Madam Chair. Dr. Negron, just to refresh my memory and just so that I have it clear in my notes, the total number of professional development days for our teachers in this calendar, what is the number? Oh, you're on mute.
7 full days,
Okay,
with half of one of those being dedicated to the classroom setup.
okay.
And then on the early release, make sure I'm giving you the right number. It would be 13 that will be dedicated to professional learning.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure I note that.
You're welcome.
Ms. Oliver, is your hand raised again, or just you forgot to lower? You forgot? Okay. I didn't ask my question. I'm sorry. My thought is has always been school starts one day and then you get a half day. I think that's a disconnect. I don't know. For parents, like, oh, first day of school, then the next day after, it's a half day.
So Ms. Brody, in this calendar, it's a full week, no early release.
I thought I saw it on the day.
Right, so
I'm
let me
sorry.
bring you back. Give me 1 second, and I'll see if I can project that one again for you.
Okay.
So if I bring you back to, can you see it? Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
So if I go to this slide, look at August, right? So it would mean that the kids
Oh,
coming
I
on the
was
29th.
looking. Okay, in my mind, we were starting on after Labor Day. Yep, we're starting before Labor Day. Okay,
Yes,
thank you,
a
thank you.
full week, no interruptions.
And the data that was asked, that could we get the data on? And I'm thinking someone asked the half day attendance, because you referenced that half days. In my experience when I was in the schools, it'd be like a half day you ain't going. Like I was like, really, they do that? Like but it was very true. Some families, if you have a half day, you're just not going. So if I believe someone asked, but if they didn't, I would like to review how we did, and it probably would come later on, as much as we have on when we did the we've had early release days and how it affected our attendance.
So I'll be happy to share with you that heat map that I referenced,
Mhm.
that we now have data for a good number of years. When you look at that, I just want to make sure that I shared, right? We have to be cognizant that you're not going to be comparing apples to apples, because you have to think about the fact that in there, you're also going to be looking at 2 years of a pandemic. So you
Mhm.
also have to think about that as a factor. But yes, I will share that file with you.
Okay, thank you. So with that said, I do see the superintendent has joined us, so we're going to conclude the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, and we are going to move into executive session. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So move. Sorry.
Is there-
Second,
And who was it seconded by?
Francoise Ledger.
So it was moved and seconded to go into executive session. And I'm just going to say the names that we're saying before we take a vote. So we would be taking Attorney Rifkin, we would be taking our superintendent, Ms. Meserick, Attorney Meserick, and Ms. Santiago. If you're in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Abstentions?